Hey, Wayne Fox, another video, another gear related video. This prompted by the other video I did about the Thunderbolt 3 SSD that I bought. And in that video I mentioned that I only use a MacBook Pro as my workstation, both at home and on the road. I've always had a Mac Pro at home. Or at my main editing location. And I've always had to go back and forth between the two. I decided to try the MacBook Pro as a workstation at home, where I do most of my work and still have it for the road. It makes life a lot easier. So I splurged and bought the maxed out 6-core, highest GPU, highest SSD version of the MacBook Pro. And I bought an eGPU for it so that I could get some of the benefits of the workstation. And speed-wise, it's really great. I have had no problems at all. I think it keeps up or surpasses the Mac Pro that I had. And so right now I'm really happy with it, but the problem you have is that a portable laptop like that only has a few ports on it. In this case, there's 4 USB-C style ports, which are either Thunderbolt 3 or USB-C connectors. They also connect to a mini display or display port if you want to put a monitor in them. But when you get to a workstation at home, I've got a lot of stuff I've got to hang off of it. I've got 2 30-inch displays. I've got a chain of 5 Thunderbolt RAID devices. I've got at least 7 or 8 USB devices, be it printers, scanners, etc. I prefer a wired Ethernet connection into my hub because it talks to my printer a little more reliably. So I want an Ethernet cable. It's just can't do that with 4 ports. And you know, by the time you buy 4 dongles and get everything, it's just a mess. And that's where these little connectors come in. OWC came out with this one. It's a Thunderbolt 3 dock. And the whole idea is that you plug your one cable from your computer into this port here, which also charges your computer and supplies power. And it'll take that one Thunderbolt 3 connection and give you 13 other ports. This is a 14 port dock, and the connection to the computer counts as one. So all I have to do is set my laptop on this cooling pad that I have. I plug in my eGPU to one side. Plug in my Thunderbolt 3 port or dock into the other side, open it up to wake it up. I just wait till my displays come on and everything's all hooked up, and as soon as that's done, then I can shut the laptop. I really like this one, but I decided to put one of these at my workstation at my office as well, and this one was a little bit big. The spot I had was a little smaller, and I've been kind of eyeing up this one made by CalDigit, and obviously the footprint's a lot smaller. And this is also nice because you can stand it up. It's got a rubber base here, or it's got rubber bumpers so you can sit it down like this, so it works either way. This one's considered a 15 port dock, but that's a little deceiving because they separate out the 2 jacks for audio, headphone and microphone, whereas these are combined like most devices. It's pretty easy to split those out into 2 if you really need to. So to me, this is really about the same number of ports. But there are a couple of really key differences in what this one offers versus this one. And more importantly, a feature on this one that I would prefer. And when I say this one, I mean the new one, the 14 port one that OWC is making. This is the 12 port one. If you don't need that, you can still buy the 12 port one and it saves you $50. So I thought what I would do is I would go and kind of show the ports on the computer and just tell you every port that it's got. And then I've got a list of what each one has that's different. So it'll help you decide if you'd prefer this one or this one if you're thinking about getting one of these, or if you want the 14 port version of this one, which is the one I wish I had now because of the need for a micro SD card. And that's the main thing that OWC's added to this one. So let's go over to the computer and let's list all that out, and I'll give you some ideas. If you're interested in either of these, I've got links to these at my in below. You can take a look down there and you can go over to Amazon and compare the features there. So anyway, let's go take a look. So here's the port configuration of the 14 port version of the OWC Thunderbolt 3 dock. You have a micro SD card slot, and I've put in red ones that are different from the CalDigit. And you have a standard SD card slot. Now, both of these are compatible with standard as well as the UHS Type 2 SD cards. Those are the ones that have the extra pins on the back. I've got a picture just so you know what I'm talking about. A lot of devices aren't compatible with those yet. It has the audio headphones and microphone into a single jack. As I mentioned, you can split that out if you need them separate. It has a high-powered USB 3.1 Gen 1, and Gen 1 means it's a 5 gigabit per second device. This supplies 1.5 amps of power to anything that you're trying to charge from it, so that's kind of a nice feature. It also has a USB-C Gen 2 port on the front, which is capable of 8 gigabit per second. So it's not quite the full Gen 2 spec, but it's faster than a standard one. On the back side, you have another high-powered 1.5 amp port that can charge devices very quickly, as well as a 5 gigabit Gen 1 USB port. And you have 3 other USB ports. These supply the standard 0.9 amps of power to anything plugged into them. You have an optical audio out port. You have a gigabit Ethernet port. This is your Thunderbolt 3 out port, which connects to your chain. And of course, it's also a USB-C Gen 2 port if you don't have anything to use for Thunderbolt out the back. And this is the full 10 gigabits a second capability. This is your connector to your host computer, which supplies 85 watts of power to keep your computer charged, plenty. This is a mini DisplayPort connector, which goes to a DisplayPort device. Of course, you can also place a DisplayPort connector out of the Thunderbolt 3 connector as well. So you can technically hang 2 DisplayPort devices from this, one out of the Thunderbolt port and one out of this mini DisplayPort. And of course, it has a power in port. So that's how the 14-port version of this OWC dock lines up. Just quickly, I'm going to show you the difference. And if you buy the 12-port version, you lose the micro SD card slot and you lose the USB-C port on the front. Other than that, they're identical. So those are the 2 things that you lose. And for that, it's $50. So let's go over to the CalDigit now. The CalDigit, if you start looking at the front, it has an SD card slot. And again, this is both standard and UHS Type 2 SD cards. It has a audio out for microphone or for headphones, and it has an audio microphone in. They're separate, which can be good or bad depending on what you're plugging into them. It has a USB-C 3.1 Gen on the front. Notice that this is a Gen 1, whereas the Thunderbolt or the OWC, this was a Gen 2, so it was about capable of a little faster speed. It has a USB 3 normal USB port on the front as well. I can't find any specs on these ports, so I'm assuming these are all the normal 9.9 amp charging capability. CalDigit doesn't mention anything about any of them having extra power. I'm not sure how important that is. A lower powered port will still charge a device. It just takes longer. It's just a matter of how much power you can supply to the battery. And so if it has less power, it just takes longer. I think it'll still charge just about anything. On the back side, you have another USB-C 3.1 Gen 2 port, 10 gigabits a second. And this is a major difference. I should have had this in red because it's separate from your Thunderbolt 3 port on the back. So you can put you can use 2 USB-C devices and not lose your Thunderbolt 3 chain if you use the CalDigit. So if you have a USB SSD that you want to plug in the back, you can also still plug in your Thunderbolt 3 hard drive or whatever you've got. You don't lose that. So to me, that's a really big difference that some people, that's the one thing to look at. So it also has the optical audio out. It's got the gigabit Ethernet. It has the power in. Instead of a mini DisplayPort, this has a regular DisplayPort connector. A lot of people that use a Mac have a mini DisplayPort to DisplayPort cable, because that's kind of how we've been using mini DisplayPort connectors for a long time. This means if you have one of those, you might have to buy another cable to connect to your display. It's got a Thunderbolt 3 or USB-C. All Thunderbolt 3s are also capable of talking to a normal USB-C device. I couldn't find out if this is a Gen 1 or Gen 2 speed, and I'm assuming it's Thunderbolt USB-C because that's pretty standard. Just like on the MacBook Pro, all 4 can talk to USB-C device as well. And again, you could use this to go directly to a DisplayPort as well. So I actually use a USB-C style to display port cable to power one of my monitors. Here again, you have the host to computer connection, which again supplies 85 watts of power, very similar to the other. And finally, you have 4 USB 3.1 Gen 1 connections. So let's just kind of go through the differences between the two. The OWC claims to have 14 total ports, whereas CalDigit claims 15. It's a little deceiving because that just means that the microphone and headphone jacks are combined in the OWC and they're separate. That might be an advantage for some people, and depending on what your need is. The micro SD card on the front to me is kind of a big deal. I know if you're shooting a Hero 7 or you've got any drones, or in my case, I've also got some audio recorders that most of those use micro SD cards, and it's nice to just be able to plug those in. You don't need to get the adapter out. There is no micro SD card in the CalDigit, so you'd have to use a SD card adapter for those. There's no dedicated USB-C on the back. If you use a USB-C connector on the back, you lose your Thunderbolt 3 chain, whereas the CalDigit does have a USB-C Gen 2 on the back, so you can have both Thunderbolt 3 chain going out the back to hard drives, as well as a connection to a USB-C hard drive or device of some kind. The USB-C connector out of the front of the Thunderbolt is a Gen 2, capable of 8 gigabit per second, versus a Gen 1 5 gigabit per second on the CalDigit. So slight advantage to the OWC here. The OWC has two 1.5 amp USB ports, so you can charge devices much more efficiently. And all of the USB ports on the CalDigit are the standard 0.9 amp ports as far as I can find out. So slight advantage, although I don't really put a lot of need in that. Most of the time when you're charging a device, you're actually just plugging it into a wall socket. But if you stick your iPhone on something and it's charging, it might be handy. The OWC dock is $299 and the CalDigit is $309, so $10 less expensive. The OWC has a larger footprint. It's still compact and not bad, but the CalDigit, that's the main thing I liked it for, was how compact it was, small, and how you can use it both in either vertical or horizontal format. The OWC dock can be two colors, a gray, or they call it space gray, or silver. I guess they're still space gray from the Apple, because I think that's the color that they call it. One other item of note, there is a 12-port version of this dock, which saves you $50. You lose the micro SD card slot, and you lose the dedicated USB-C port out of the front. You also may have a problem using USB-C devices, because most likely the port on the back, you're going to want to have a Thunderbolt hard drive attached to it, so you no longer will have a USB-C port in the dock. However, you probably still have 2 or 3 empty USB-C ports in the MacBook itself, so there's you can always hook up something to that. You don't have to have everything coming out of the dock itself. So the 12-port version might be a good option, save you a little money. They're both built really well. The quality is really good. They both function really well. And so it really comes down to if you need the micro SD card, if you need the extra USB-C connector on the CalDigit, if you need the ability to charge devices from the USB ports from one of them. The price, of course, is the big difference to me is basically the footprint. That's really the other big difference. Well, that does it for the video. I hope that gave you a few ideas. I know most people that watch this video, it's because they're specifically searching for something like this. So I assume if you're on the video, you're probably thinking about getting one of these, trying to make up your mind. Most of my subscribers, I don't even know if they'll be interested in this, but the only thing I will add to this is that I don't think either one of these, as far as quality of build, is superior. This one's all metal. It's very nice, but this one's also built well. You can get this one in 2 colors. You can get it in a gray or darker gray, and it's built really well. They both perform equally well. I haven't had any issues with either one, losing connections or any problems like that. So really it does come down to a matter of the ports, which one you prefer, and or the size, and or the price. Well, again, thanks for watching the video, and until next time, take care.